Things They Usually Don't Teach You, Year 2021A. This program is being brought to you during a time of COVID-19 and distance. While the new high school is open, the studio is not yet up and running, so I will be narrating the program for this first Things They Usually Don't Teach You of the new year. It is physically impossible for pigs to look up and see the sky. They can lie down to see the sky, but not in a standing position. The anatomy of their neck muscles won't let them look up. The only way left to see the sky, or only its reflection, is to look in the mud or water. Hydra, an aquatic creature, is the only living creature that never dies. In reality, you see what it looks like on the left, but on the right, you see how writers have betrayed them to be. A hydra regenerates, replacing its cells with fresh ones. Hydra are a group of invertebrates that look like tiny tubes with tentacles protruding off one end. They grow only about 10 millimeters long and eat even tinier aquatic animals. Elephants are the only animals that can't jump. Elephants can't jump, and there's one simple reason: they don't have to. Most jumpy animals, your kangaroos, monkeys, and frogs, do it primarily to get away from predators. Elephants keep themselves safe in other ways, relying on their huge size and protective social groups. As it turns out, it's hard to get a 4-ton of mammal off the ground all at once. In the case of an elephant, in fact, it's impossible. Unlike most mammals, the bones in elephants' legs are all pointed downwards, which means they don't have the spring required to push off the ground. Honey is the only food that doesn't spoil. Honey is a sugar. You may have heard all sorts of things about the health benefits of substituting honey for sugar, which may or may not be true. While honey isn't the same as regular granulated white sugar, it's still a sugar, and sugars are hygroscopic. They don't contain much water in their natural state, and very few bacteria microorganisms can live in the resulting low moisture environment. Strawberry is the only fruit with its seeds on the outside. While it is true the strawberries are covered in tiny yellow seeds, the red edible part of the strawberry is not actually a fruit. The dried seeds on the outside of the strawberry are the actual fruit. The birth of the bulletproof vest. The bulletproof vest was actually invented by a pizza delivery guy from Detroit after he was shot twice on the job. Yes, if you're talking about the company founded as Second Chance, American body armor manufacturing company that was founded in the early 70s by a former U.S. Marine and pizza delivery driver, Richard Davis. A lady, Stephanie Kwolak, created Kevlar, the material used for bulletproof vest. Which is the wealthiest continent in the world? According to the GDP reports for continents in 2016, North America is the wealthiest continent, but by the number of billionaires, Asia ranks first with 719 billionaires. Like fingerprints, everyone's tongue print is different. The tongue is a unique organ in that it can be stuck out of the mouth for inspection, and yet it is well protected in the mouth and very difficult to forge. The tongue also presents both geometric shape, informational, and physiological texture information, which are potentially useful in identity verification applications. You burn more calories sleeping than you do watching TV. Believe it or not, it is true. In fact, you burn twice as many calories when you're asleep compared to laying on the couch being a couch potato. Sleeping isn't considered a huge caloric burner. You're not exactly working up a sweat in your sleep. But you might be surprised to learn that the average 150-pound woman burns about 63 calories an hour sleeping. More if you have a greater muscle mass, another reason to get to the gym. During sleep, the body is using energy to restore and repair itself, unlike when you're sitting watching TV. Turning down the thermostat and not drinking alcohol before bedtime will increase the caloric burn even more. Watching TV, on the other hand, burns about half that, not to mention increases your appetite. The first product to have a barcode was Wrigley's Gum. It was a Thursday morning when the first unique sticker of white and black lines facilitated the purchase of a 10-pack of juicy fruit gum from Chicago-based William Wrigley Company. The barcode was scanned at 8:01 on June 26, 1974 at the Marsh Supermarket in Troy, Ohio. The Smithsonian National Museum of American History now holds one of the first 10 scanners used to scan barcodes at this supermarket. Keep toothbrushes at least 6 feet from toilets. Dentists have recommended that a toothbrush be kept at least 6 feet away from the toilet to avoid airborne particles resulting from the flush. Toothbrushes can act as a lightning rod for bacteria, viruses, and even what we call fungi, mold, or mildew. Dr. Jerry Quarota, founder of Rejuvenation Dentistry and the author of the book Smile for Life, Rejuvenation Dentistry and Art of Wellness, told Fox News. The types of bacteria can range anywhere from bacteria in the mouth that cause tooth decay and gum disease to strep bacteria to E. coli. Because most people store their brushes in the bathroom, it's easy for them to be infested with fecal matter and other microbes you wouldn't want in your mouth. If you're keeping your toothbrush within 6 feet of the toilet, that's too close, according to Cortola. People don't realize there can be more bacteria on the toothbrush than on the toilet seat, Cortola said. The tooth is the only part of the human body that can't repair itself. The only part of your body that has no blood supply is the cornea in the eye. The only living cells in the body that aren't directly served by blood vessels are those in the cornea. Oxygen and nutrients instead diffuse directly from the tear fluid on the outside and the aqueous humor, the thick, watery substance between the lens and the cornea, on the inside, as well as along the nerve fibers that are connected to the cornea. It's impossible to hum while holding your nose. You just tried it, didn't you? Normally when you hum, the air is able to escape through your nose to create the sound, and of course, it can't do that when you're holding it shut. This is one of the weird facts that you can test out on yourself. Go ahead, give it another try. In the Philippines, McDonald's serves spaghetti. The pasta comes with a beef tomato sauce and a piece of McDo fried chicken. The British royal family is named after Windsor. You'd think Windsor Castle was named after the House of Windsor, but it's the other way around. The royal family changed its name from Saxe-Coburg-Gotha in 1917 so it would sound less German and choose Windsor because they had ties with the English town. Before toilet paper was invented, Americans used to use corn cobs. Alternatively, they used periodicals like the Farmer's Almanac, which was designated with a hole so it could hang in outhouses. Please note to the left, it still has the hole for hanging. Necessity is the mother of invention after all. The Empire State Building has its own zip code. It's home to 10118. Why do we use zip codes? In 1944, a postal inspector named Robert Moon submitted an idea for a new postal zone system that would cover the whole country. What does each number in a zip code mean? The first number would stand for states. East Coast is 0 and the West Coast is up to 9. The second and third numbers would specify to which sectional center, facility, the place where the mail gets processed and distributed. The fourth and fifth are to include the proper post office or postal zones. The 4 digits that come after your zip code, these stand for the specific area that any given post office covers. The sixth and seventh number refer to the delivery sector, which could be a group of streets, one large building, or another small geographical area. The last two stand for the delivery segment, like the floor of an office building or one side of a street. This zip code map should explain what I was talking about earlier. You notice on the right hand side the yellow areas are all starting off with zeros. These are the eastern coast states. The far left, you see that they have nines. Pennsylvania, you notice in the blue, 150196. Local zip code here for myself is 15367. We remember two zip codes usually. Your local one and 90210 for Beverly Hills. The shortest war in history lasted 38 minutes. When the Sultan of British protected Zanzibar died and a new one took over without British approval in 1896, the Brits were not happy. Tensions escalated when the Sultan Kahid bin Bargash refused to step down, but the British war steps spent less than 40 minutes bombarding the palace before Khalid fled, marking the very quick end to the Anglo-Zanzibar War. A flock of ravens is called an unkindness. They're also known as a conspiracy, which is equally creepy. A group of ravens is called an unkindness or treachery or conspiracy, probably because some people get ominous feelings when they see them grouped in a flock. For the most part, however, people usually refer to a group of ravens as a flock. George Washington didn't have wooden teeth. One of the longest standing myths about the great head of state is that his dentures were made of wood. In fact, they only looked like that they were because they had become stained and brownish with time. His teeth were never made of wood. We do know, from a few historical records, that he had dentures made of cow teeth, copper, lead, silver alloy, but not wood. He did have an awful dental problem. By the time he gave his first inaugural address in 1789, Washington only had one remaining natural tooth. Washington's dentures also contained real teeth, probably, as I mentioned earlier, from cows and horses, and definitely from people. He saved some of his own teeth that had been pulled. In one of his account books lists a purchase of 9 teeth from individuals enslaved at his plantation. A toilet doesn't flush the opposite way in the southern hemisphere. The Coriolis effect does mean that the Earth's rotation makes hurricanes and cyclones spin counterclockwise in northern hemisphere and clockwise below the equator. There is some basis to think that this might happen, but because of the small amount of water in a toilet, it can't be affected in the same way. It circles down the drain according to whatever forces guide it within the toilet. Any tiny lack of symmetry in the drain, including backup or crooked insulation, will direct the water flow. Notice, please, the most expensive toilet ever made was a gift Arab King Abdullah gifted a toilet made of gold to his daughter on her wedding day. The Ring of Fire. 9 out of 10 of the world's earthquakes and 75% of its volcanoes occur as a result of tectonic activity that's in what's known as the Pacific Ring of Fire. It circles volcanically and seismically active hotspots marking the meeting points of several plates that all encircle the large Pacific Plate. Napoleon Bonaparte wasn't that short. He was actually about average height for that time, approximately 5 feet 7 inches. But cartoons published in England depicted him as a short, according to the 2016 column by Tristan Hopper in the Canadian newspaper, The National Post. When he died, the people present said he measured 5'2", but that was because of the difference between the French and British units of measurement. However, he had already been depicted for years as a small, petty, childish person in British cartoons. When was the Declaration of Independence signed? The country declared its independence on July 2, 1776, which John Adams wrote would become the most memorable epocha in the history of America. The final draft was completed and approved by Congress 2 days later, July 4th, but wasn't signed until August the 2nd. And I had to look up the term epoch, and it meant an event or time marked by an event that begins a new period of development or a memorable event or date, just in case you were wondering. Which African country named its capital after a U.S. president? The American Colonization Society established an African colony in 1822 as a new home for freed slaves. In 1847, the settlement gained its independence and became the country of Liberia. Its capital, Monrovia, was named for James Monroe, who was president from 1817 to 1825. Which Civil War battle had the most casualties in any single-day fight? Antietam had 22,726 casualties in just one day. This stood as about 5% of the total deaths during the Civil War. Gettysburg had more than 51,000 killed, but that was a 3-day battle. But that number, 51,000, were more than were killed in the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, and the Mexican War combined. They'll put a man on the moon before I hit a home run. In 1963, Major League Baseball pitcher Gaylord Perry remarked, "They'll put a man on the moon before I hit a home run." On July 20th, 1969, an hour after Neil Armstrong set the foot on the surface of the moon, Perry hit its first and only home run while playing for the San Francisco Giants. The dot over the small letter I and J are called a tittle. This dot is an integral part of the lowercase I and J. These dots also appear over the letters in various languages. Disneyland serves 2.8 million charros a year. The charros was introduced to South America in 1500s during the Spanish Inquisition. About the same time, the Spanish brought cocoa to Europe, which they thickened with cane sugar to make hot chocolate. That probably explains why churros and hot chocolate is still a go-to pairing to this day. Yellow and red stimulate hunger. Picture all of the major fast food joints in your country. What does McDonald's, KFC, Popeyes, and Chick-fil-A have in common, aside from being fast food giants? All of their logos and branding have elements of red and yellow. This is because red and yellow psychologically stimulate hunger. Apollo 11 only had 15 seconds of fuel when it landed. Before the Apollo landing was confirmed with "the Eagle has landed," the crew nearly didn't make it. The Apollo crew had to fly manually instead of following the plotted trajectory to avoid dangerous areas. As such, it cut down on their fuel. Before the successful landing, the 30-second fuel warning had already passed. Musicians' lifespans are 25 years shorter. A Sydney University professor who conducted a study of life and death of artists in the pop music industry over the past 50 years has studied the deaths of these artists between 1950 and June 2014. The study focuses in particularly on artists from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s to the present day, as well as those from recent years. The study named Stairway to Hell: Life and Death in the Pop Music Industry. Every odd number has an E in it. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm sure you'll do that. Most bees don't make honey. Out of the 20,000 species of bees on Earth, only 7 make honey. The Chinese invented paper currency. During the Tang Dynasty, ruled between 618 and 907, China invented paper money. There used to be a warning written right on the bill that all counterfeiters would be decapitated. On the right-hand side, note printed on dark slate paper from the mulberry tree. One of the unusual things about the money from these other countries is they're different colored. Most people look at the United States currency and realize it's in the minority of countries that have one color currency. The Great Wall of China was built with rice. Many of these structures remain intact. Buildings constructed with sticky rice mortar have withstood natural disasters including earthquakes. Heck, one Ming-era tomb remained stock still until the advances of the modern-day bulldozer. These structures prove that sticky rice mortar is stronger and lasts longer sometimes than pure lime mortar. Minnie the Mouse's first name is not Minnie. It's Minerva. Minnie Mouse is a nickname that was given to the character by Ub Iwerks and Walt Disney. Minnie's actual name is rarely ever used. What was recorded as the most boring day in the world? Next time you hear a friend complain that today was the most boring day in history, you can tell him to prove it. A Cambridge scientist has developed a computer program to calculate the most lackluster day since 1900. The Telegraph reports the verdict, April 11, 1954. Roller coasters were invented to distract Americans from sin. In the 1880s, hosiery businessman Lamarcus Thompson hated that Americans were tempted by places like saloons and brothels. Many of the evils of society, much of the vice and crime which we deplore, come from the degrading nature of amusements. Mr. Thompson so set out to straighten up one of the most immoral places he could think of, Coney Island in New York. There he built America's first roller coaster to give New Yorkers some good, clean fun, away from seedier pastimes. A woman was elected to Congress before women's suffrage. American women were given the right to vote in 1920, but Jeannette Rankin became the first woman in the U.S. federal office in 1916. She was an American politician and women's rights activist, and she was the first woman to hold federal office in the United States. She was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives as a Republican from Montana in 1916 and again in 1940. Fruit Loops are all the same flavor. No point in eating around the purple ones. All Fruit Loops taste like fruit, other than the wild berry Fruit Loops, of course. Dunce caps used to be a sign of intelligence. 13th century philosopher John Duns Scotus believed that a pointed cap would help spread knowledge from the tip to the brain, and his Dunsman's followers wore them as a badge of honor. In the 1500s, though, his ideas became less popular and the meaning of the Dunce cap was turned on its head, becoming something of a joke. How did Johnny Carson cause a toilet paper shortage? You know what's disappearing from supermarket shelves? Toilet paper. There is an acute shortage of toilet paper in the United States. Johnny Carson, December 1973. It was a joke, right? Well, people can be intensely naive and will believe just about anything, as was previously shown by people who thought Gilligan's Island were real castaways and demanded the Coast Guard rescue them. For a second time, at least, people thought comedy was a real event. Almost immediately, people began rushing to the supermarkets and convenience stores to buy toilet paper. While it was unknown to him at the time, Johnny Carson had just created a toilet paper shortage, and it was nationwide. In January 1974, He went back on the air and apologized for the mayhem, explaining it was only a joke, but the damage had been done. Shelves remained almost completely empty for over 3 weeks, and stores had to ration supplies until levels could be built back up to normal levels once again. The Guinness Book of Records. To date, more than 100 million copies of the 400 editions of the Guinness Book of Records have been sold in some 40 languages, making it one of the world's all-time best-selling copyrighted books. Harry Potter is the best-selling. But the Guinness Book of Records also holds the record for being the book most often stolen from public libraries. Weatherman Willard Scott was the first Ronald McDonald. Willard Herman Scott, Jr., born March 7, 1934, is an American weather presenter, author, television personality, actor, clown, comedian, and radio personality, best known for his TV work on the Today program, and as of the creator and original portrayer of Ronald McDonald. George Washington and the Cherry Tree. The story of George Washington and the cherry tree goes that Washington received a hatchet from his father as a gift when he was a boy. He then proceeded to chop down a cherry tree, and when his father asked him what happened, he said something along the lines, "I cannot tell a lie." Yet, this story never happened, but was made up in 1806 by author Mason Locke Weems, who wrote a book about Washington, adding in stories that showed the first president of the United States was a man of virtue. A distinguished history. With all the history we have behind us, it can be hard to keep track of everything, which is why it seems super disorientating to think that the University of Oxford, which opened its doors to students in 1096, is actually older than the Aztec Empire, which began in 1427 by hundreds of years. The Tale of Two Lovers. Pius II was greatly admired as a poet by his contemporaries, but his reputation in belles lettres rests principally upon his Tale of Two Lovers, which continues to be read partly from its truth to nature and partly from the singularity of a novel being written by a future pope. The French term belles lettres means beautiful or fine writing. The four kings in a deck of cards. Each king in a deck of playing cards represents a great king of history. The spade king, King David. The clubs, Alexander the Great. Hearts, Charlemagne, and the diamonds, Julius Caesar. Thanks for joining me today. Hope you've enjoyed the program. So far in the new year, we were able to put together the first Travel with Bill 2021A, and now this Things They Usually Don't Teach You 2021A. Stay tuned for the first Talking Politics in Western Pennsylvania 2021A. First time in a long time we've done that program.